Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked down the cracked sidewalk of Maple Street. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the old neighborhood, where most houses needed fresh paint and the streetlights flickered more often than they stayed on. At 15, Marcus had learned to find joy in small things. Today, that joy came from the $20 bill folded carefully in his pocket, money he had earned by helping Mrs. Rodriguez clean her garage. Walking beside him were his two best friends, Jamal and Terrence. The three boys had been inseparable since elementary school, despite their different personalities. Jamal, also 15, was the joker of the group. He could make anyone laugh even during the toughest times. His worn-out sneakers squeaked against the pavement as he mimicked their strict math teacher, causing Marcus to chuckle. Terrence, the youngest at 14, was the quiet thinker. Behind his thick glasses, his mind was always working, always observing. The boys lived in East Cleveland, where opportunities were scarce, but dreams were abundant. Marcus lived with his grandmother in a small house that always smelled like her famous cornbread. His grandmother, who everyone called Nana Ruth, worked double shifts at the local diner to make ends meet. She had raised Marcus since he was 7, after his parents died in a car accident. Despite their struggles, Nana Ruth always taught Marcus that helping others was the most important thing a person could do. Jamal came from a family of 6 children. His mother worked at a grocery store and his father drove a delivery truck when work was available. Money was always tight, but the house was always filled with laughter and love. Jamal had learned early that humor could heal almost any wound, and he used this gift to keep his family's spirits high during difficult times. Terrence lived with his single mother, who cleaned office buildings downtown during the night shift. She would come home exhausted every morning, but she never missed asking Terrence about school or helping him with his homework. Terrence was incredibly smart and dreamed of becoming an engineer one day. His mother always told him that education was the key to a better life. The three friends were heading to the corner store to buy some snacks when they heard a loud pop, followed by the sound of a car pulling over. They looked up to see an expensive-looking black sedan stopped on the side of the road about 50 yards ahead of them. Steam was rising from under the hood, and they could see a man in a nice suit standing next to the car, looking frustrated. "Looks like someone's having car trouble," Marcus said, slowing his pace. "That's a really nice car," Terrence observed, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Looks like it costs more than my mom makes in a year." Jamal whistled softly. "Man, I've never seen a car like that in our neighborhood. Wonder what he's doing around here." As they got closer, they could see the man more clearly. He appeared to be in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive-looking watch that caught the sunlight. He was talking rapidly into his cell phone, pacing back and forth beside his car. His voice carried a tone of frustration and urgency. "No, I can't wait 2 hours for a tow truck," they heard him saying. "I have a very important meeting." "Yes, I understand it's a busy day, but..." He paused, looking at his watch again. Fine. Just send someone as soon as possible." The man hung up the phone and ran his hand through his hair. He looked around the unfamiliar neighborhood with uncertainty in his eyes. This was clearly not a place he visited often. He walked around to the front of his car and lifted the hood, revealing an engine that was smoking and hissing. Marcus felt a familiar tug in his chest, the same feeling he got whenever Nana Ruth reminded him about helping others. He stopped walking and turned to his friends. "We should help him," Marcus said quietly. "Help him with what?" Jamal asked, raising his eyebrows. "None of us know anything about fixing cars. My dad can barely keep our old Honda running." "Maybe we don't know about cars," Marcus replied, "but we know this neighborhood. We could at least ask if he needs anything, maybe call someone for him or help him find a safe place to wait." Terrence nodded slowly. "Marcus is right. My mom always says we should treat people the way we want to be treated. If one of our families was stuck in a strange neighborhood, we'd want someone to help." Jamal looked at his two friends and shrugged. "All right, but if this goes bad, I'm running. These shoes might be old, but they can still move fast." The three boys approached the stranded man cautiously. As they got closer, they could see the worry lines on his face and the way he kept checking his expensive watch. His car was indeed very luxurious, the kind they had only seen in movies or driving through the wealthy parts of the city. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus called out politely when they were about 10 feet away. "Are you okay? Do you need any help?" The man looked up from his phone, and for a moment his expression showed surprise. He studied the three young faces looking at him with genuine concern. In his world of business deals and corporate meetings, he wasn't accustomed to strangers offering help without wanting something in return. "Oh," the man said, his voice softening slightly. "Well, my car seems to have broken down. I've called for a tow truck, but they said it could be 2 hours or more before someone arrives." "That's a long time to wait out here in this heat," Terrence observed. "There's some shade over by that big oak tree if you want to move over there." The man looked where Terrence was pointing and nodded. That's very thoughtful, thank you." Marcus stepped a little closer. "Is there anything else we can do to help? We live around here, so we know the area pretty well." The man paused, looking at these 3 young boys who had stopped their afternoon to help a complete stranger. Something in their earnest expressions reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. The simple kindness that existed in the world. The kind he rarely encountered in his daily life of boardrooms and business deals. "Actually," the man said, looking around nervously, "I'm supposed to be at an important meeting across town. I don't suppose you boys know if there's a taxi service around here, or maybe a bus route?" Jamal almost laughed but caught himself. Taxis rarely came to their neighborhood, and when they did, they charged extra just for making the trip. Instead, he said gently, "Sir, taxis don't really come through here much, and the nearest bus stop is about a mile away. Plus, the buses only run every hour." The man's shoulders sagged slightly. He looked at his watch again, and the boys could see the stress building in his face. Marcus felt sorry for him. Despite the expensive clothes and fancy car, the man looked lost and worried, just like anyone else would be in this situation. "What kind of meeting do you have?" Terrence asked innocently. "Maybe we can help you figure out another way to get there." The man hesitated for a moment, as if he wasn't used to explaining himself to anyone, especially not to 3 teenagers he'd just met. "It's a business meeting. Very important. I'm supposed to sign some papers for a new project we're starting." Marcus had an idea. "Well, you could use our phones to call someone to pick you up, or maybe we could help you look under the hood. My friend's dad knows about cars. Maybe it's something simple." The man looked surprised. "You would do that, but you don't even know me." "Doesn't matter," Marcus replied with a shrug. "You need help, and we can try to help. That's what neighbors do." For the first time since they had approached him, the man smiled genuinely. "That's very kind of you. I'm Robert, by the way." "I'm Marcus, and these are my friends Jamal and Terrence," Marcus said, gesturing to his companions. Robert shook hands with each of the boys, which surprised them a little. Most adults in suits who drove expensive cars didn't bother with formal introductions to kids from their neighborhood. "All right, Mr. Robert," Jamal said, rolling up his sleeves dramatically. "Let's see what's wrong with this fancy car of yours. I might not know much about engines, but I've watched a lot of YouTube videos." This made Robert chuckle despite his stress. The boys gathered around the front of the car, looking at the steaming engine with the serious expressions of amateur mechanics. Terrence pulled out his phone and started searching for information about the car's make and model. "The coolant reservoir looks empty," Terrence said, pointing to a plastic container near the engine. "And there's green liquid on the ground under the car. Looks like a coolant leak." Marcus nodded, impressed with his friend's quick thinking. "There's an auto parts store about 3 blocks from here. They might have coolant, and maybe someone there could tell us how serious this is." "But even if we get coolant," Jamal added, "if there's a leak, it'll just leak out again. We need to find where it's coming from." Robert listened to the boys discussing his car problem with increasing amazement. These 3 teenagers were taking his situation more seriously than some of the expensive mechanics he had dealt with in the past. "You know what?" Robert said, reaching for his wallet. "Let me give you some money for the coolant, and maybe we can at least get the car running long enough for me to get somewhere safe." Marcus held up his hand. "Don't worry about the money, mister." "Robert, I've got some." He patted his pocket where his $20 bill was still folded. "Yeah," Jamal added, "and I've got $5. That should be enough for coolant." Robert stared at them in disbelief. "You boys would spend your own money to help me?" "It's not about the money," Terrence said quietly. "It's about doing the right thing. My mom always says that when you help someone, you're not just helping them. You're making the whole world a little bit better." While Terrence and Marcus headed to the auto parts store, Jamal stayed with Robert to keep him company and help him move the car to the shade. As they waited, Jamal entertained Robert with stories about the neighborhood and jokes about their school. Despite his worry about the meeting, Robert found himself laughing at Jamal's impressions of their teachers and his observations about life in general. "You're a funny kid," Robert said, loosening his tie a bit as they sat in the shade. "Do you want to be a comedian when you grow up?" Jamal's expression became more serious for a moment. "I'd like to be, but comedians don't make much money, and my family needs me to have a steady job. I'm thinking maybe I'll be a teacher or something during the day, and try comedy at night." Robert was struck by the maturity in Jamal's answer. At 15, this boy was already thinking about his responsibility to his family, balancing his dreams with practical reality. When Marcus and Terrence returned with the coolant and a funnel they had borrowed from the store, they found Robert and Jamal deep in conversation about Jamal's family and his dreams. The auto parts store clerk had given them some advice about the coolant leak and suggested they look for loose hose clamps. "The man at the store said if we can tighten the hose clamps, it might stop the leak temporarily," Marcus explained as he opened the coolant container. "At least long enough for you to get to a real mechanic." Working together, the four of them managed to locate the loose connection that was causing the leak. Using a small wrench that Robert had in his trunk, they tightened the clamp and refilled the coolant reservoir. The boys took turns pouring coolant while Robert held the funnel steady. "Try starting it now," Terrence suggested after they had finished. Robert got behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine started smoothly and no more steam came from under the hood. The boys cheered quietly, proud of their automotive success. "I can't believe it," Robert said, getting out of the car with a huge smile on his face. "You boys actually fixed my car." "We all fixed it together," Marcus corrected. "You helped too." Robert checked his watch and realized he could still make his meeting if he left right away. But as he looked at these three remarkable young men, who had given their time, money, and effort to help a stranger, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine human connection based on kindness rather than business interests. "I don't know how to thank you," Robert said, his voice filled with emotion. "You boys have restored my faith in people today." "Just pay it forward," Marcus said with a smile. "Help someone else when they need it." Robert nodded, getting back into his car. As he drove away, he waved to the three boys who stood watching him leave. None of them had any idea that their simple act of kindness was about to change their lives forever. Marcus was helping his grandmother hang laundry in their small backyard when he heard the unusual sound. It was around 10 in the morning, and the Saturday sunshine felt warm on his shoulders. Nana Ruth was telling him about her plans to plant tomatoes. In the corner of the yard when they both heard what sounded like a very expensive car engine purring down Maple Street. "That's not a sound you hear much around here," Nana Ruth said, pausing with a wet towel in her hands. She had lived in this neighborhood for 37 years and could tell the difference between the sounds of all the local cars. The wheezing of Mr. Johnson's old pickup truck, the rattling of the teenager's modified Honda, and the coughing of Mrs. Garcia's van that needed a new muffler. This sound was different, smooth, quiet, expensive. Marcus walked to the side gate and peered through the wooden slats toward the street. What he saw made him blink twice to make sure he wasn't imagining things. A pristine white Rolls-Royce was moving slowly down their street, as if the driver was looking for something specific. "Nana, you need to see this," Marcus called softly. Nana Ruth joined him at the gate, wiping her hands on her apron. When she saw the luxury car, her eyebrows rose so high, they almost disappeared under her gray hair. "Now what in the world is a car like that doing in our neighborhood?" The Rolls-Royce stopped directly in front of their house. Marcus felt his stomach do a little flip. In his 15 years of living on Maple Street, he had never seen a car worth more than maybe $15,000 parked anywhere near their home. This vehicle looked like it belonged in a movie about rich people, not on a street where most folks had to save up to afford new tires. Two men in dark suits got out of the car. They looked around the neighborhood with the careful attention of people who weren't familiar with the area, but weren't afraid either. The driver, a tall man with graying hair, walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Out stepped Robert. Marcus's mouth fell open. The man they had helped yesterday with his broken-down sedan was now emerging from what looked like the most expensive car in Ohio. But it wasn't just the car that was different. Robert looked different too. Yesterday, he had seemed like a worried businessman with a car problem. Today, he carried himself with the confident posture of someone very important. "Marcus," Nana Ruth said slowly. "Do you know that man?" Before Marcus could answer, Robert spotted him standing by the gate. The older man's face broke into a warm smile, and he began walking up the cracked sidewalk toward their house. "Marcus," Robert called out. "Good morning." Nana Ruth looked at her grandson with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Marcus, who is this man and why is he driving a car that costs more than our house?" Marcus was still trying to process what he was seeing. "That's Mr. Robert. Yesterday, me, Jamal, and Terrence helped him when his car broke down. But Nana, his car yesterday was nice, but it wasn't anything like that." Robert reached their gate and extended his hand to Nana Ruth. "Good morning, ma'am. You must be Marcus's grandmother. I'm Robert Harrison. I wanted to thank you for raising such a wonderful young man." Nana Ruth, who had been a waitress for most of her adult life and could read people pretty well, shook Robert's hand cautiously. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Harrison. Marcus mentioned helping someone with car trouble yesterday, but he didn't mention anything about—" She gestured toward the Rolls-Royce. Robert chuckled. "Well, that's because yesterday I was driving a different car, a company car that broke down at exactly the wrong time. But your grandson and his friends didn't just help me fix my car. They helped me in ways they probably don't even realize." Down the street, Marcus could see curtains moving in windows as neighbors peered out to see what was happening. Mrs. Rodriguez was standing openly in her front door, not even pretending she wasn't staring. The Martinez children had stopped their bike riding to gawk at the fancy car. "Is everything okay?" Nana Ruth asked, still uncertain about this situation. "Are the boys in some kind of trouble?" "Oh, quite the opposite," Robert said warmly. "They're remarkable young men. Is it possible to speak with Marcus and also contact his friends? I have something I'd like to discuss with all of them." Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, Jamal was sweeping the front porch when his little sister Keisha came running around the corner of the house, her eyes wide with excitement. "Jamal! Jamal!" she yelled, bouncing on her toes. "There's a white car like the ones in music videos parked in front of Marcus's house. And there's men in suits." Jamal leaned the broom against the porch railing. "Keisha, what are you talking about?" "Come see. Come see." She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the street. When Jamal saw the Rolls-Royce, he felt the same shock Marcus had experienced. This was definitely not normal for Maple Street. He started walking quickly toward Marcus's house with Keisha trailing behind him, asking 100 questions that he couldn't answer. At the same time, Terrence was in his bedroom working on a science project when his mother knocked on his door. She worked nights and usually slept until noon on Saturdays, so Terrence was surprised to see her awake. "Terrence, honey," she said, "there's a very expensive car parked at Marcus's house, and Mrs. Johnson just called to say there are men in suits asking about you boys. Do you know anything about this?" Terrence put down his textbook and walked to the window. Even from 3 blocks away, he could see the white Rolls-Royce gleaming in the morning sun. His analytical mind immediately started trying to figure out what was happening, but he came up with nothing that made sense. "I think I should go over there," Terrence said quietly. His mother nodded. "I think that's a good idea. And Terrence, take your phone and call me if anything seems wrong." When all 3 boys were gathered in Marcus's small front yard, along with Nana Ruth and several curious neighbors who had found excuses to be outside, Robert looked at them with the same warm smile he had worn the day before. "I wanted to come and thank you boys properly," Robert said. "But first I owe you an explanation. Yesterday, when you helped me, I wasn't entirely honest with you about who I am." The boys exchanged glances. Jamal was the first to speak. "Are you, like, in trouble with the law or something? Because if you are, we probably shouldn't be talking to you." Robert laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. "No, nothing like that. Actually, it's quite the opposite. You see, I'm Robert Harrison. I'm the CEO of Harrison Industries." Terrence's eyes widened behind his glasses. Even at 14, he recognized that name. Harrison Industries was one of the biggest companies in the state, involved in everything from technology to real estate development. "You mean," Terrence said slowly, "you're the Robert Harrison, like Billionaire Robert Harrison?" "I prefer to think of myself as just Robert," the man replied with a smile. "But yes, that's me." Nana Ruth sat down heavily on her front porch steps. Marcus felt dizzy. Jamal's mouth opened and closed several times without any sound coming out. They had helped a billionaire fix his car, and now he was standing in their neighborhood in front of their houses, talking to them like they were old friends. "But why didn't you tell us yesterday?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert's expression became serious. "Because yesterday I learned something very important about you three young men. You helped me not because of who I was or what I could do for you, but simply because I needed help. That's incredibly rare, especially in my world." The implications of what was happening began to sink in for the boys and their families. This wasn't just a thank you visit. When billionaires showed up at your house with luxury cars and men in suits, they usually had bigger plans in mind. Robert looked at the three boys and their gathered family, members with an expression that mixed admiration with something deeper. Perhaps a kind of hope that had been missing from his life for a long time. "Yesterday," Robert began, "I was on my way to finalize the purchase of a small tech company. It's a deal worth about $50 million. When my car broke down, I was frustrated because I thought I might miss the meeting and lose the opportunity." He paused, looking at each of the boys. "But sitting here with Jamal while we waited for Marcus and Terrence to come back, listening to him talk about his dreams and his family, something changed for me. I realized I've been so focused on making money that I've forgotten what really matters." Nana Ruth was listening intently, her arms crossed, trying to understand where this was heading. The neighbors who had gathered were whispering among themselves, trying to process the fact that one of the richest men in the state was standing in their neighborhood. "The meeting I was rushing to," Robert continued, "it would have made me richer, but it wouldn't have changed any lives for the better. The company I was buying developed software to help other wealthy people manage their investments more efficiently. More money for people who already have plenty." Terrence adjusted his glasses, his analytical mind working. "So what happened? Did you miss the meeting?" "No, I made it there on time, thanks to you boys. But when I sat down in that boardroom, I kept thinking about what you said, Terrence, about making the world a little bit better. And I kept thinking about Marcus's willingness to spend his own $20 to help a stranger, and Jamal's maturity in thinking about his family's needs while still holding on to his dreams." Robert walked over to the Rolls-Royce and retrieved a leather briefcase from the back seat. "So I called off the deal. $50 million that would have just sat in my bank account, doing nothing meaningful." The boys stared at him in amazement. Marcus couldn't even comprehend having $50 million, let alone walking away from it. "Instead," Robert said, opening his briefcase, "I want to invest that money in something much more valuable. I want to invest it in people like you three." He pulled out a thick folder of documents. "I've been thinking all night about what you boys did for me. It wasn't just fixing my car. You treated me like a human being who needed help, not like an opportunity to gain something. In my world, that's almost unheard of." Jamal found his voice first. "Mr. Robert, what are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that I want to start a foundation. The Marcus, Jamal, and Terrence Foundation for Community Excellence. The sole purpose will be to find young people like you three, kids who demonstrate real character, who help others without expecting anything in return, who have dreams but might not have the resources to pursue them." Nana Ruth stood up from the porch steps, her voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Harrison, this is very generous, but we're not charity cases. These boys work hard and we take care of our families." Robert nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, I completely understand and I hope you'll hear me out. This isn't charity. This is partnership. I've built my business by recognizing talent and character, and these three young men have both in abundance." He turned back to the boys. "Marcus, you're 15 years old, and you were willing to spend your own money to help a stranger. That shows leadership and selflessness. Jamal, you're thinking about your family's future while pursuing your own dreams. That shows balance and maturity. Terrence, you approached a complex problem systematically and found solutions. That shows intelligence and persistence." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "But what would we have to do?" "What are you asking from us?" "First," Robert said, "I want to ensure all three of you can pursue your education without financial barriers. College tuition, books, room and board, whatever you need. But more than that, I want you to help me identify other young people in communities like this one who have the same character you've shown." He pulled out a document from the folder. "I've had my lawyers draw up a proposal. The foundation would provide full scholarships for deserving students, but it would also do more. It would create mentorship programs, job training initiatives, and small business loans for young entrepreneurs in underserved communities. Terrence's eyes lit up as he began to understand the scope of what Robert was proposing. You're talking about changing entire communities, not just helping individual people. Exactly, Robert said, smiling at Terrence's quick grasp of the concept. But I can't do this alone. I need people who understand these communities from the inside. I need people who know what real character looks like because they have it themselves. Jamal was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What if we mess up? What if we're not smart enough for something this big?" Robert's expression became gentle. "Jamal, you boys were smart enough to see that a stranger needed help and mature enough to provide it without expecting anything in return. You were smart enough to work together to solve a problem you'd never faced before. Trust me, you're smart enough for this." Marcus looked at his grandmother, trying to read her expression. Nana Ruth had raised him to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. But looking at Robert's sincere face and thinking about their interaction the day before, Marcus sensed this was genuine. "There's one more thing," Robert said. "I don't want this to change who you are. Yesterday I met 3 remarkable young men who helped someone because it was the right thing to do. I want you to stay exactly who you are. The foundation will provide opportunities, but it won't change your values or your connection to your families and communities." He handed the folder to Marcus. "Take your time. Read through everything. Discuss it with your families. I'm not asking for an answer today. But I wanted you to know that what you did yesterday, that simple act of kindness, has the potential to impact thousands of other young people's lives." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been listening from her doorway, finally approached. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison," she said in her accented English, "but why should we trust you? Rich people don't usually come to neighborhoods like ours unless they want something." Robert turned to her with respect. "Ma'am, you're absolutely right to ask that question. I don't expect your trust immediately, but I can tell you this. Yesterday, your neighbor's grandson and his friends showed me something I had forgotten existed. They reminded me that there are still people in this world who do the right thing simply because it's right." He gestured toward the boys. "I'm not asking them to trust me because I'm wealthy. I'm asking them to consider a partnership because they've already proven they have the character needed to make a real difference." The weight of the moment settled over everyone gathered in the small front yard. 3 15-year-old boys from East Cleveland were being offered the opportunity to change not just their own lives, but potentially the lives of countless other young people in communities across the country. Marcus looked at the folder in his hands, feeling its weight both literally and figuratively. Inside those papers was a future he had never imagined possible, offered by a man they had helped simply because he needed help. "We'll read everything," Marcus said quietly, "and we'll talk to our families." "When do you need an answer?" "Take as much time as you need," Robert replied. "But Marcus, I want you to know, whether you accept this opportunity or not, what you 3 did yesterday mattered. It mattered to me, and it's going to matter to a lot of other people." That evening, Marcus sat at his grandmother's small kitchen table, the leather folder open in front of them. Nana Ruth wore her reading glasses and had a cup of coffee growing cold beside her, as she carefully read through each document. The papers outlined scholarship opportunities, mentorship programs, and a structure that seemed too generous to be real. "Baby," Nana Ruth said finally, setting down the last page, "this man is talking about paying for your entire education, plus giving you a job helping run this foundation while you're still in school." Marcus nodded, still trying to process it all. "The salary alone would be more than you make at the diner, Nana." Nana Ruth was quiet for a long time, staring at the papers. "Marcus, honey, I've worked my whole life to give you opportunities. I never imagined an opportunity like this would just walk up to our front door. Are you worried it's some kind of trick?" Marcus asked. "I'm worried about a lot of things," his grandmother replied honestly. "I'm worried about what happens if this man changes his mind. I'm worried about you boys getting caught up in a world where you don't understand the rules. But most of all, I'm worried about what happens if you don't take this chance." She reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. "Yesterday you spent your own money to help a stranger because I taught you that helping others is important. Today, a billionaire is offering to help thousands of other children because you showed him what real character looks like. Baby, I think God is trying to tell us something." Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Jamal's house was buzzing with activity. His parents, 4 siblings, and 2 aunts who had come over after hearing the news were all gathered in the small living room. passing around copies of the foundation documents that Robert's office had delivered. "This is crazy," said Jamal's older sister Maya, who was studying business at the community college. "Look at these numbers. They're talking about full tuition to any college he wants, plus room and board, plus a salary for working with the foundation." Jamal's father, who had been quiet through most of the discussion, finally spoke up. "Son, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Did you boys do anything wrong yesterday? Is this man trying to buy your silence about something?" "No, Dad," Jamal said firmly. "All we did was help him fix his car and talk to him while we waited. He was just a nice man who seemed worried about his meeting." "A nice man who happens to be worth $3 billion, his mother added, shaking her head in amazement. "The question is," said Aunt Carmen, who worked as a school counselor, "is this real? And if it is real, what's the catch?" Jamal had been thinking about this all day. "I keep going back to what he said about not wanting us to change who we are. If he wanted something bad from us, why would he say that?" At Terrence's house, the conversation was more analytical. His mother had called in sick to work so she could research Robert Harrison and his business practices. She had spent the afternoon on the computer at the library, printing out articles and financial reports. "From everything I can find," she told Terrence as they sat together on their small couch, "this man has a reputation for being honest in business. He's donated millions to education before, and there haven't been any scandals or lawsuits." Terrence was reading through the foundation's proposed structure. "Mom, look at this part about the selection criteria. They want to find kids who demonstrate character, academic potential, and community engagement. It's not just about grades or test scores." "That's what impresses me," his mother said. "A lot of scholarship programs only care about perfect students. This one seems to care about good people." She was quiet for a moment, then continued. "Terrence, honey, you know I've worked 2 jobs since your father left to make sure you could focus on school. I've always told you that education is the key to a better life. Well, this man is offering you the key to not just a better life, but the ability to help other kids find that key too." The next morning, the 3 boys met at their usual spot, the corner where they had first seen Robert's broken-down car. Each of them carried the weight of their family's hopes and concerns. "So," Marcus said, "what do you guys think?" "I think I'm scared," Jamal admitted. "This is way bigger than anything I ever imagined for myself. What if I mess up?" "But what if you don't?" Terrence countered. "Look, I've been thinking about this all night. Yesterday, we helped one person. If we accept this opportunity, we could help thousands of people. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" Marcus thought about his grandmother's words from the night before. "My Nana says she thinks God is trying to tell us something. She also says that sometimes opportunities come disguised as ordinary moments and you only recognize them later." "My mom did research on Mr. Harrison," Terrence continued. "He's legitimate. The foundation structure is legitimate. The money is real." Jamal was quiet for a moment, then started to smile. "You know what? Yesterday we fixed a broken car. Today we have the chance to help fix broken systems that keep kids like us from reaching their potential. When you put it like that, it seems like the same kind of problem, just bigger." Marcus grinned at his friend's logic. "So we're really going to do this?" "I think we have to," Terrence said. "Not just for us, but for all the other kids who are going to benefit from this foundation. And," Jamal added with his characteristic humor, "I really want to see what the inside of a Rolls-Royce looks like." That afternoon, the 3 boys walked together to Marcus's house where Robert was waiting as promised. Their families gathered around as Marcus, speaking for all 3 of them, gave their answer. "Mr. Harrison," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his nervousness, "we've talked to our families and we've talked to each other. We want to accept your offer, but we have some conditions." Robert raised his eyebrows with interest. "I'm listening." "First," Marcus continued, "we want our families involved in all the major decisions. They're the ones who taught us the values that made you want to help us in the first place. Second," Terrence added, "we want to make sure this foundation really helps kids who need it most, not just kids who look good on paper. And third," Jamal finished, "we want to stay living here in this neighborhood with our families. This is our community, and we don't want to lose touch with where we came from." Robert smiled broadly. "Gentlemen, those aren't conditions. Those are exactly the qualities that convinced me you were the right people for this job." He pulled out a contract and handed it to them. "Welcome to the Harrison Foundation for Community Excellence. Your first assignment is to help me understand how we can make the biggest positive impact in communities like yours." As the three boys signed their names to the contract, surrounded by their families and neighbors, Marcus thought about how strange life could be. 24 hours ago, they were just three kids from East Cleveland who helped a stranger fix his car. Now they were partners in an effort to change the world. But as he looked at Jamal's excited grin and Terrence's determined expression, Marcus realized that they were still the same three kids who believed in helping others. They just had bigger tools to work with now. "So," Robert said as they finished signing, "ready to change some lives?" Marcus looked at his friends and smiled. "We've been ready our whole lives. We just didn't know it yet." 5 years later, Marcus stood in front of a packed auditorium at Cleveland State University wearing his cap and gown. As the valedictorian of his graduating class in business administration, he was about to deliver the commencement speech. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, his eyes found the three people who mattered most. Nana Ruth, sitting in the front row with tears of pride in her eyes, and his best friends Jamal and Terrence, who had graduated the day before from Case Western Reserve University. "Fellow graduates, families, and distinguished guests," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. 5 years ago, my friends and I learned that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the entire direction of your life. In the audience, Robert Harrison sat quietly in the back row, listening to the young man whose character had inspired him to completely reshape his approach to philanthropy. The Harrison Foundation for Community Excellence had grown beyond even his wildest expectations. But more importantly, it had maintained the heart and values that Marcus, Jamal, and Terrence had brought to it from the very beginning. Marcus continued his speech, telling the story of that day on Maple Street, though he had told it hundreds of times before at foundation events, scholarship ceremonies, and community gatherings. But each time he told it, he discovered something new about the power of simple human kindness. "The lesson we learned that day," Marcus said to the graduating class, "is that you never know when your life is going to change. You never know when a simple choice to help someone will open doors you didn't even know existed. But more importantly, you never know when your character is being tested in ways that will define not just your future, but the futures of people you haven't even met yet." After the ceremony, as families gathered outside for photos and celebrations, Marcus found Robert standing near the steps of the auditorium. "Congratulations, Marcus," Robert said, shaking his hand warmly. "I'm incredibly proud of what you and the boys have accomplished." Marcus smiled, thinking about everything that had happened since that day 5 years ago. The foundation had awarded over 200 full scholarships to deserving students from underserved communities. They had started mentorship programs in 15 cities, created small business loan programs for young entrepreneurs, and even established community centers in neighborhoods that had been overlooked by other organizations. But perhaps more importantly, Marcus, Jamal, and Terrence had never lost sight of who they were or where they came from. They still lived in their old neighborhood, though they had been able to help their families buy nicer homes on the same streets where they grew up. They still gathered at the same corner where they first met Robert, now called Foundation Corner, by the local kids who knew their story. Jamal had discovered that his gift for making people laugh was perfectly suited for motivational speaking. While completing his degree in communications, he had become one of the Foundation's most popular speakers, traveling to schools and community centers to share their story and encourage other young people to believe in the power of their own character. His dream of being a comedian hadn't died. It had evolved into something even more meaningful. Terrence had pursued his engineering degree while also studying nonprofit management. His analytical mind had proven invaluable in designing programs that actually worked, rather than just sounding good on paper. Under his guidance, the Foundation's programs had success rates that amazed even experienced philanthropists. More than 90% of their scholarship recipients graduated from college, and over 80% went on to careers where they continued giving back to their communities. "Mr. Harrison," Marcus said, "I need to ask you something I've wondered about for 5 years. That day when your car broke down, was it really an accident?" Robert laughed, the same warm laugh that had put the boys at ease 5 years earlier. "Marcus, I've been waiting for one of you to ask me that question. Yes, it was completely accidental. My car really did break down. I really was stressed about missing my meeting, and I really was a stranger in your neighborhood. But here's what wasn't accidental, Robert continued. The way you boys responded to seeing someone who needed help. That was a choice you made based on the values your families taught you. That's what changed everything. As if summoned by the mention of their names, Jamal and Terrence appeared, having finished taking photos with their own families. Jamal was characteristically animated, talking with his hands about something that was making Terrence laugh. The dynamic duo, Robert said as they approached. How does it feel to be college graduates? Terrifying and exciting at the same time, Jamal replied. Tomorrow we start working full-time for the foundation instead of just part-time. That's a lot of responsibility. But it's the good kind of responsibility, Terrence added. The kind where you get to wake up every day knowing you're going to help someone. Over the past 5 years, the three friends had worked for the foundation while attending college, spending their summers visiting communities across the country to identify young people who demonstrated the same character they had shown that day. They had developed an instinct for recognizing authentic kindness and genuine potential, often finding remarkable young people in the most unexpected places. Speaking of helping people, Marcus said to Robert, we have some ideas for expanding the foundation's reach. Terrence has been working on a proposal for an online mentorship platform that could connect volunteers with kids in rural areas where we don't have physical programs. And I've been developing a curriculum for character education that could be implemented in schools, Jamal added. We're calling it the flat tire principle, teaching kids that you never know when your character is being tested or when a simple act of kindness might change everything. Robert shook his head in amazement. These three young men continued to surprise him with their innovation and their commitment to serving others. I'd love to hear more about both of those ideas. Why don't we schedule a meeting for next week? As the afternoon wore on and families began to head home, Marcus found himself walking back toward Maple Street with his grandmother, Jamal, and Terrence. The neighborhood had changed somewhat over the past 5 years. Several houses had been renovated, the street lights had been repaired, and there was a new community center that the foundation had helped fund. But the essential character of the place remained the same. You know what I think about sometimes? Terrence said as they walked past the spot where Robert's car had broken down 5 years earlier. What's that? Marcus asked. I think about all the people who drove past Mr. Harrison that day before we came along. They probably had good reasons for not stopping. They were late for work, or they didn't know anything about cars, or they were worried about getting involved with a stranger. Jamal nodded thoughtfully. Or maybe they were just having bad days and weren't thinking about anyone but themselves. The thing is, Terrence continued, any one of those people could have been in our position today if they had just stopped to help. It makes me realize how many opportunities to change the world we probably walk past every single day, without even noticing them. Marcus thought about this as they reached his grandmother's house. Nana Ruth had invited everyone for Sunday dinner, as she did most weeks. The house was still small, though they had been able to add a new bathroom and update the kitchen. But more importantly, it still felt like home. As they sat around the dinner table that evening, Marcus, Jamal, Terrence, their families, and Robert, who had become like an honorary member of their extended family, Nana Ruth asked everyone to hold hands for grace. Lord, she said in her strong, clear voice, we thank you for this food, for this family, and for the reminder that you often work through ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary kindness. Help us never to forget that the smallest acts of love can change the world. Amen. Amen, everyone responded. After dinner, as they sat on the front porch watching the neighborhood kids play in the street, Robert turned to the three young men who had become his partners in changing the world. I have a confession to make, he said. When I started this foundation, I thought I was doing something generous for you boys. I thought I was the one giving and you were the ones receiving. He paused, watching a group of children chase each other around the old oak tree where they had shared shade 5 years earlier. But the truth is, you three have given me far more than I could ever give you. You reminded me what real success looks like. You showed me that the most important measure of a life isn't how much money you accumulate, but how many other lives you improve. Marcus, Jamal, and Terrence exchanged glances, each thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years ago, they were 3 teenagers who helped a stranger with a broken car. Today, they were college graduates preparing to dedicate their lives to helping others discover their own potential. But in the most important ways, they were exactly the same people they had always been. young men who believed that helping others was simply the right thing to do, regardless of what you might receive in return. As the sun set over Maple Street, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus realized that their story was far from over. In fact, it was just part-time. That's a lot of responsibility. But it's the good kind of responsibility, Terrence added. The kind where you get to wake up every day knowing you're going to help someone. Over the past 5 years, the three friends had worked for the foundation while attending college, spending their summers visiting communities across the country to identify young people who demonstrated the same character they had shown that day. They had developed an instinct for recognizing authentic kindness and genuine potential, often finding remarkable young people in the most unexpected places. Speaking of helping people, Marcus said to Robert, we have some ideas for expanding the foundation's reach. Terrence has been working on a proposal for an online mentorship platform that could connect volunteers with kids in rural areas where we don't have physical programs. And I've been developing a curriculum for character education that could be implemented in schools, Jamal added. We're calling it the flat tire principle, teaching kids that you never know when your character is being tested or when a simple act of kindness might change everything. Robert shook his head in amazement. These three young men continued to surprise him with their innovation and their commitment to serving others. I'd love to hear more about both of those ideas. Why don't we schedule a meeting for next week? As the afternoon wore on and families began to head home, Marcus found himself walking back toward Maple Street with his grandmother, Jamal, and Terrence. The neighborhood had changed somewhat over the past 5 years. Several houses had been renovated, the streetlights had been repaired, and there was a new community center that the foundation had helped fund. But the essential character of the place remained the same. You know what I think about sometimes? Terrence said as they walked past the spot where Robert's car had broken down 5 years earlier. What's that? Marcus asked. I think about all the people who drove past Mr. Harrison that day before we came along. They probably had good reasons for not stopping. They were late for work, or they didn't know anything about cars, or they were worried about getting involved with a stranger. Jamal nodded thoughtfully. Or maybe they were just having bad days and weren't thinking about anyone but themselves. The thing is, Terrence continued, any one of those people could have been in our position today if they had just stopped to help. It makes me realize how many opportunities to change the world we probably walk past every single day without even noticing them. Marcus thought about this as they reached his grandmother's house. Nana Ruth had invited everyone for Sunday dinner, as she did most weeks. The house was still small, though they had been able to add a new bathroom and update the kitchen. But more importantly, it still felt like home. As they sat around the dinner table that evening, Marcus, Jamal, Terrence, their families, and Robert, who had become like an honorary member of their extended family, Nana Ruth asked everyone to hold hands for grace. Lord, she said in her strong, clear voice, we thank you for this food, for this family, and for the reminder that you often work through ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary kindness. Help us never to forget that the smallest acts of love can change the world. Amen. Amen, everyone responded. After dinner, as they sat on the front porch watching the neighborhood kids play in the street, Robert turned to the three young men who had become his partners in changing the world. I have a confession to make, he said. When I started this foundation, I thought I was doing something generous for you boys. I thought I was the one giving and you were the ones receiving. He paused, watching a group of children chase each other around the old oak tree where they had shared shade 5 years earlier. But the truth is, you three have given me far more than I could ever give you. You reminded me what real success looks like. You showed me that the most important measure of a life isn't how much money you accumulate, but how many other lives you improve. Marcus, Jamal, and Terrence exchanged glances, each thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years ago, they were 3 teenagers who helped a stranger with a broken car. Today, they were college graduates preparing to dedicate their lives to helping others discover their own potential. But in the most important ways, they were exactly the same people they had always been. Young men who believed that helping others was simply the right thing to do, regardless of what you might receive in return. As the sun set over Maple Street, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus realized that their story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Tomorrow they would start their full-time work with the foundation, And somewhere out there were other young people whose lives were about to change because someone had shown them kindness. The flat tire that had brought Robert Harrison into their lives had been fixed long ago. But the impact of 3 boys who chose to help a stranger continued to ripple outward, touching lives they would never know in ways they could never have imagined. And on quiet evenings like this one, sitting on the porch where he had grown up, Marcus could almost hear the sound of those ripples spreading across the world, carrying the simple truth that kindness once shared never really ends.